you. Good job. My name's Dan Todd. I'm the senior editor for Smartish Pace, a position to which I was appointed at the wise and mature age of 25, 1999. Thanks, Stephen. I think it's the loftiest title I've ever held in my life. So I'm really excited that an old colleague and friend of mine is here to read, Geoffrey Woolf. They drove up from Cincinnati last night. Geoffrey Woolf lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he's Dean of Humanities and Sciences at Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. His work has appeared in Poet Lore, Cutbank, Smartish Pace, and the Cincinnati Poetry Review, among other places. He's the author of 4 collections: When You're Not Here, I Notice Things, Bogeyman, Learn to Love Explosives, and Fontaine's Golden Wheel, Fortune Teller, and Dream Book, which are both available over there. He's a graduate of the University of Iowa Writers Workshop and the Werner Institute for Negotiation and Dispute Resolution at Creighton University. Not only is Jeff an exceptional poet, but I had the privilege of working with him, and he's an extremely gifted and charismatic and no bullshit kind of teacher and educator. And I had the privilege of being mentored by Jeff for a couple of years, and I'm just super excited that he's here. So please welcome Geoffrey Woolf.
Thank you, everyone, for having me here. Thank you, David and Dan, Stephen. I really appreciate the chance to read somewhere other than in the state of Ohio. When I told some colleagues that I was coming here, I wanted to get some thoughts on how I should start this reading. They said, one of them said, and they all agreed, we like it when someone starts with an Ars Poetica, and what you should know is that's just proof of how little they know how dumb I am. Mm-hmm. And so here's a poem about dogs. Sometimes when a mime is making me uncomfortable and claustrophobic, I have to remind myself that it was his choice to get in that imaginary box in the first place. It's just that all of the unhappiest people I know are dogs whose owners keep them in those invisible fences with collars that shock them if they cross an imaginary line. And I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that those collar shocks hurt, because dogs seem to deal with pain pretty well, especially short temporary pain. You'd think it's a fair trade-off, since otherwise they'd be stuck inside waiting to be taken for a walk, and this way they at least get to spend the time they want outside. Remember that famous guy who killed himself and everyone said how he had no right to do something that's selfish, since look how rich and famous he was? I have some experience with unhappiness, and so far I can't seem to get much sympathy either, but at least I know what I'm unhappy about, and that's the way I measure my being not crazy enough for some drastic action yet. Yesterday at the post office, some lady tied a dog to a parking meter while she went in to get stamps, and that dog was barking his head off, and I swear he was getting close to bending that parking meter pole with all that pulling on his leash. He was pissed, but I'm pretty sure he was happy. I always like to read this one when my wife is around, so Schopenhauer. When I first realized that I was shrinking, I got pretty obsessed with it, and for days in a row I would weigh myself again and panicked every time I lost a pound or two, and then relieved 5 minutes later when the scale showed a gain of a pound or two. It was pretty stressful, so I took the thing back to the store where they asked me exactly what sort of precision did I expect from a $30 bathroom scale, and I didn't know, so I switched to measuring my height, which is a very difficult thing to do by yourself. With my back to the wall, I'd rest a Sharpie on top of my skull and strike lines on every wall of the house, but no 2 lines measured exactly the same, which I would call pretty inconclusive. This went on for days and days, and when she got home from her business trip, she wanted to know how the hell all the wallpaper got ruined. She was huge. It was terrifying. I write poems today because Langston Hughes broke me when I was in middle school. There was this poem called Hope. It goes like this. He rose up on his dying bed and asked for fish. His wife looked it up in her dream book and played it. When I was in 7th grade, I thought that was the weirdest thing I'd ever read. And it wasn't until later I figured out what it was all about. It was about playing the number and using a dream book to pick your numbers. And so I also got obsessed with collecting old-fashioned dream books. And so my latest book, which I was really smart enough to release in April of 2020, clever, was the goal was the goal to take some big moments in lotteries and see if I could reverse engineer the dreams that one might have had to have in order to get those lottery wins. So that's a very short version of this. So the next group of poems are going to sort of be tied to that. So the first Mega Millions ever drawn was in May 17th of 2002. Animals. The part that gets you is not that the elephant remembered your birthday, but that you must have talked a dozen times about your preference for dark chocolate, and there he stands waiting for you in the lobby as you get off the elevator with what sure enough turns out to be another box of milk truffles and a sweatshirt from your favorite team 2 sizes larger than anything you've worn in 15 years. You offer to share your slice of birthday cake at lunch, and he refuses, but keeps nipping off tiny chunks with his trunk, slipping it furtively into his mouth when he thinks you're not looking. He picks up the check and lets you get the tip. It's been a long friendship. You can't even remember when it started, except you're positive it was before selling ivory was illegal. The third largest lottery jackpot. Now everything's changed since we now have these billion-dollar lotteries. But when I wrote this, these really cute little numbers like, $640 million. This was the third largest lottery jackpot ever won. That was March 29th of 2012. Depends on chickens. The ceasefire with the neighbor's children was 6 months old. No sign the little bastards would violate the truce. The war had been long. It was July. They were safe away at camp. Yet the hen house was in ruins. I was the Jewish housemaid. No other explanation for the deep revulsion I felt while grinding pork to make the sausages. I dropped my basket and ran. The 11 miracles of that day were that all 10 hens survived, not just alive, but in finest feather, and 1 egg rocked slow and unharmed in the aftermath. Perched atop the cannonball, the rooster crowed. I like villanelles, and I also recognize that they're evil. So I'm going to read one. One of the largest ever received was a split 3 ways. One of the recipients of the lottery was in a Southern California neighborhood that gives the name to this poem. It's called Chino Hills Revised Code. You know there is a law but can't recall what it says. You stand with a penknife still drawn, watching in amazement as the giant falls. It was a 2-inch blade, and that is all. You can't imagine how deep it could have gone, and you know there is a law but can't recall if you are covered here. If someone saw that this was self-defense, blade against brawn, you watch in disbelief as the giant falls. You see what is to come, and you wish you could forestall his impending landing on your neighbor's lawn. You know there's law but can't recall who bears responsibility for the holloway of such a massive execution. You watch with growing dread as the giant falls, and wonder if you have the wherewithal to bear the consequence of what you've done. You know there is a law but can't recall, watching in amazement as the giant falls. Like most Gen X males, I'm obsessed with Lucy Maud Montgomery. That's Anne of Green Gables and Emily of New Moon. And so I thought we needed to represent Canada in this book. So the largest unclaimed lottery, this is what I love about it, is the largest unclaimed lottery in Canadian history. And in my books, I go one of 2 ways. I either write prose poems or I'm a formalist, I guess. So a lot of these coming up are sonnets. I apologize for that as well. This is called Emily of New Moon. When I think of how you boyed so badly all these years, what a worry it's been to mother, how it's posed such difficulty for your dad, how if you could be born again, I know the universe is built in such a way that this could only ever be your draw. But if destiny shapes what we are today, and they are right who wouldn't change at all the things that make them be what they've become, then to fight is just about as much good as to not, or just to lie amid the hum of bees buzzing in the tansy patch. It's not just any boy will take on the world, or has the balls to be such a fierce girl. I needed a reference to pavement in the book because it's the only way I could get my friends to read it. This is another unclaimed jackpot called Range Life. In the early light of the buffalo graveyard where we'd made our camp, you touched my hair and went away. Half asleep, I could not know that you had said goodbye forever. Ham was on the fire and I was cleaning pistols when I realized you would not return. To never have is better than the longing. To never know is better than to learn what you have lost. I still kill prodigiously, and every shot's report still brings me joy. Without you, though, in mornings waking early, there's a moment when I think I still might not try. It's folly to attempt to whet great memory. These beasts grow scarce, and that might be a mercy. So one of the things I like to do is, because I'm really lazy, is I like to write what I call fake ekphrastic poetry. That's the one where you skip like looking at a piece of art to write the poem with, and you just imagine a piece of art and then write a poem about it. And there are a bunch of those in the Learn to Love Explosive books, and they're all called Leaves, and it's weirdly because they're all about people leaving bad situations, or leaving good situations that they've misunderstood as being bad. This one's probably a bad situation. There are just a few ways of being happy, but the ways of being sad are infinite, and this is why we have art. It is also why modern sculpture poses problems. If one believes that somewhere inside this perfect cube of marble, a form waited to be released, but was instead trapped in the cold sheen and violet edges that demand one revisit that time when one fell and rapped one's forehead on the corner of grandmother's cold marble end table and bled and how worried she was about the carpet, then the experience will end in disappointment, because inside this cube waiting to be released is another cube. And inside that, another. The artist knows this to be true because this cube was cut from a larger cube, which was cut from a larger one, which was cut from a larger one, and even though he had the courage to stop when he realized that his work would be rewarded only with smaller and smaller cubes, even he remains haunted by the possibility of the form. Sometimes, on free admission days, he sneaks into this room with his tools and paces circles around the object until a guard takes him for a sandwich in the cafe. This is what happens when hope leaves and the image stays behind. This is what happens when the image leaves and hope stays behind. One of those is true, I'm never certain which. Amputees. This guy I knew at school, when he asked his girlfriend to marry him and she said no, went a little crazy and changed his name like it was the most normal thing in the world, and it wasn't even a regular name either. It was the name of a hero in some kung fu movie. From then on, he made me pretty nervous, and I couldn't put my finger on why, but when he moved to Alaska, I was kind of relieved. It's a lot of pressure being around new people, and he was the worst kind of new person, one you already know. You'd be surprised how many of these people with heroic-sounding names weren't born that way. Most of them have to get pretty fucked over to get a badass name like Siegfried or Freya. So when Karen came to work one day and told us she was going to be called Nike from then on, none of us knew that Nike was the winged goddess of victory, but we all knew that her affair with the boss was over. I'm gonna end with predictions. So one of the things that we have, one of the things that happens in the dream book is not only do I re-engineer some poems, but I also go back and make some predicted lottery wins. So if you want, here are my predictions for a couple of ones that have to be coming soon. They're both based on your chance of dying in an asteroid strike, which is, in case you wondered, 1 in 74,817,414. And so when you run those numbers through a dream book, you get these two poems, When the Asteroid Strikes versus When the Asteroid Passes By. So I'll give you When the Asteroid Passes By. It's May, and you're walking along the river in a heavy sweater and a wool cap pulled over your ears. The lady at the lodging house was very understanding and didn't hesitate to loan them to you. She seemed accustomed to people overestimating the warmth of the Ebro Valley in May, and you saw no harm in letting her think it was poor research that brought you here so badly prepared, and in a way it was. You don't know why you're here, and you know you've been reading Hemingway, annoyed by how the boxwood and the neighbors had planted smelled so strongly of cat piss, which made you think of that Basque game whose ball is made of rubber and wool wrapped around a boxwood core. And then you're on a plane to Barcelona, and then you're on a train to Miranda, and then you were 5 days in a garret of the first inn you found stepping off the train. You're walking since the chambermaid forced you from the room so she could do her job, and you're wondering how much longer until it's safe to go back, and you're buying a paper you can't read, and you're sitting in a cafe drinking coffee, and you're sitting in a cafe drinking beer, and you're sitting in a cafe drinking a drink from the story. Something was supposed to happen, but it didn't. This is When Asteroids Strike. You're feeling pretty cocky about coming through the earthquake completely unharmed, except that you lost your mail key down the kitchen drain, and even that seems not too bad since it was so much fun to watch it jiggle across the counter and dive like an Olympian down the hole. You could have stopped at any time but didn't, so it's hard to see how plate tectonics are to blame. The smell of frying onion wafts from the street through your window, so you know at least one restaurant is open. You walk downstairs in search of coffee. The sidewalks are empty, stores are opening. It's brilliant. Today feels like a perfect day to unquit smoking. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Geoffrey. That was beautiful and captivating and humorous. You're an excellent reader. Thank you so much for making the trip and doing this for us. We really appreciate it. I planned on buying your book anyways, but the pavement reference seals the deal. Geoffrey also has a few poems in this issue of Smartish Pace, including the Schopenhauer poem he read, the one about the scale, returning the scale. If anybody wants a copy, I have like 2 extra copies afterwards. You're free, they're free, so you're welcome to have one. But buy his book. Before we take a short break and I figure out how to tighten this mic, we will have, let's go with 2 more open mic readers, and then we'll do a short 5-minute break before we come back with our second feature.